It is time to talk about some reprints. Jake, we just saw a master set, and so we saw a lot of stuff that was reprinted, and these cards didn't make that list.
Yeah, that's right. Today we're talking about 12 cards that we would love to see reprinted. You can reprint them a million times, and we will never get sick of it, and the video starts right now.
Special thanks to our Patreon supporters who power our channel. Check out our Patreon for monthly giveaways, exclusive content, and even a starring role in our fan fight series. Link in the description below.
Hello and welcome to The Day.
Thank you for spending your time with us.
I'm Jake.
I'm Joel. Welcome back to another episode of Jake and Joel Are Magic. We are going to talk about some reprints that we want for Commander. We need them. Keep reprinting them. You can do it as many times as you want. Wizards will never care. But before we get into the vid, if you would, hit that like button by the end of the video. Hit that dislike button if you don't.
That's the best way to support the channel, with just the click of a button. Now, when we say you can reprint these a million times, whatever, we're talking about some cards that are scarce. We're talking about some cards that have very high demand. We're talking about some cards that are 4-ofs in constructed formats. But for the sake of this list, we're talking specifically about EDH. And these are cards that need reprints. They are getting pricey. We have a range between $30 and $80 today for these cards. Let's go ahead and get into them.
So first up, Jake, we just saw this card. Jake, Joel, this card was just reprinted. Why is it on your reprint list? Because it needs it, dudes. This card
Already.
is $66. It is one of the premier equipment. It may be the premier equipment. It is just such a house in Commander, and honestly, I'm looking forward to the day where this is one of the big draws of like Commander 2026. This is in the equipment deck, and everybody's like, "Oh, Sword of Feast and Famine's in the equipment deck. We got to go get it."
Yeah, and again, that just comes down to the scarcity of the card and the demand. And this is a card that has had multiple reprints. I mean, how many do we have on this? 4, including double masters, and it's got a couple variants as well, as far as masterpieces.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe even more if you
cards.
count promos and masterpieces, right?
Yeah, but again, that pro black, that pro green cannot be overstated just how good that ends up being in Commander. Those are 2 premier colors of removal in the format. Obviously, white has fantastic removal as well. But Sword of Feast and Famine, it's really untapping all of those lands, and it leads to very degenerate moments. And the card is very strong. And again, it slots into any deck. Artifacts are very versatile. They can go anywhere.
Untap all lands you control is a very strong grouping of words for text on a card in MTG. There's a lot of combos where untap all lands you control is being contributed from some card, and that's how you go infinite and just win in that turn. So $66 right now as we shoot for Sword of Feast and Famine. That's definitely one we'd love to see again.
The discard isn't terrible on the card. We didn't even talk about that, but it's a fine effect too, especially if one of your opponents has 1 or 2 cards. I mean, that should inform who you need to be attacking. Next card, we got Painter's Servant here. This is a card with 1 printing, and then it also appeared as a masterpiece. 2 costs, 1/3, comes into play, choose a color. All cards that aren't in play, spells and permanents, are the chosen color in addition to their other colors. So a very specific card, a very niche use, but again, very scarce and therefore demand.
There are a lot of shenanigans that you can pull off by having everything a color of your choice. I mean, just simply, most simply, if you combine it with Ugin the Spirit Dragon, you can then like blow up all the lands on the battlefield if you want to do that and be a real stick in the mud of your next Commander game. But Painter's Servant being a cheap artifact that allows shenanigans is really great. Also, let us know down in the comments if we're forgetting a huge interaction with Painter's Servant. We just know it's a really strong card. This isn't actually even a card I've actually played with myself, but at $57, having only been printed once in Shadowmoor, like Jake said, it's one that I think we would love to see again. And here's another artifact. You'll start to notice a trend. These cards that can go in multiple types of decks or are artifacts, even if they do have a very narrow effect. Cloudstone Curio lets you bounce stuff. Whenever a non-artifact permanent comes into play under your control, you return another permanent you control that shares a permanent type to its owner's hand. It's huge in Animar. I used to play an Animar deck all the time, and the ability to play a cheap creature, trigger Animar again, bounce a cheap creature back to my hand, and that's a very specific use in a very specific commander. You can just put this in any deck where you're running a ton of great enters the battlefield effects and go to town.
Yeah, like the first card that comes to mind in my just from reading the card is a card like Eternal Witness, right?
Right.
Just where, you know, if you combine, make sure that those creature types match up on the battlefield, you're able to play that Ewit over and over again. You're getting constant graveyard synergy. It's just a very strong card. And again, when you start combining these, you start putting this into, you know, any kind of tribal deck. Honestly, it's a fantastic card. So
Absolutely.
yeah, it's one of these cards again that's very scarce, and because of that demands a reprint.
Yep, only printed in Ravnica, also appeared as the masterpiece. $54 at time of shooting this. And Jake, we've got our first non-colorless card here on the list with Snappy.
That's right, Snapcaster Mage. I mean, what is there not to say about this card? This card is just insanely good. Human Wizard, so 2 very relevant creature types. The Flash, ooh, baby. Gotcha text right there. That's the moment that you know everything is going poorly for you, is when your opponent snaps in a snapper. You could do everything from like flashing back a Thoughtseize to in Commanders, any big, huge, splashy spell. You know, a Sorin's Vengeance, a freaking Wrath of God, anything, a Toxic Deluge, anything that you need to do, Snapcaster's going to bring it back. So in Commander, incredibly versatile because, again, that graveyard is your second hand. So anything that you can go and grab out of the yard, use it again, it just gives you extra slots. It gives you redundancy. That's the name of this card, is Redundancy Mage.
Innistrad, Modern Masters 17, Modern Masters 18, Ultimate Masters. This card has had no lack of reprints, unlike some of the other cards that we've talked about. This isn't scarcity play. This card is a desirable card in 4-card constructed formats, and is also a good commander card. And when those two things cross over each other, that's when you get these expensive cards that have to be reprinted on a solid, 2 to 4 year schedule, or they're going to start getting up into the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s easily.
Yes. And especially when you bring back like Modern, right?
Right.
Now that
exactly.
we're coming back and bringing, like, dude, I'm kicking myself for not picking up Stoneforge Mystics, for example. Those were as low as like $20 during Double Masters and COVID, and just like, when is tournament support going to come back? And now that Modern is back, we have these cards just shooting up. And Snapcaster Mage is no exception. I saw this card get as low as like $35 to $40, and now it's very quickly rebounded.
Yep, in the 50s for Snapcaster Mage. Another card that is in the 50s that has become a staple of Commander is Dockside Extortionist. Jake, I think everybody really firmly thought we were going to see a reprint of this card in Modern Horizons 2. Everybody analyzed it, overanalyzed it probably. You can put this goblin
Sideboard
into
card.
Modern, it'll be fine. But they decided not to reprint it. That made the price shoot immediately from $30 up to $50. We've only seen this printed in a Commander product, C19. I mean, this is such in need of a reprint. We've got to see it soon, right?
Yeah, and when it really takes just reading the card, right? Because there are so many artifacts and so many relevant, enchantments and stuff in EDH that Dockside is pretty much always going to be a house whenever it ETBs. And that's before you even flash it, you return it, do whatever kind of degenerate things. But the moment that this card hits the battlefield, you are netting just so much value. So any kind of huge card that you have in your hand, anything you want to play, you're most likely going to be able to play it. And the more treasure support that we see, and we see a lot of it, since treasure support made its very first debut, which I believe was in like Ixalan, we've seen more and more cards that are treasure related, from Revel in Riches all the way to like Dockside Extortionist here. And yeah, it's just very, very good.
Yeah, treasure support has exploded. That's a very real thing. Jake, next up, we've got the most expensive card on this list at $80. It's Greater Automancy.
Other enchantments you control have Shroud. Enchanted creatures you control have Shroud. Shroud, it's very different than Hexproof. It's before Hexproof came out, and it means that you just can't interact with it. You can't like equip it even. You can't target it with your stuff. Hexproof solved that. It was originally called Troll Shroud, which was target creature can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control. I believe that Uril the Miststalker had that original text. Well, it has changed over the years, and now we do see Hexproof, but that's just another Like this card, I could see it getting a reprint on the list or something like that, because this is one of those words that Wizards of the Coast doesn't really like a lot. They don't really like Shroud, and they've tried to move away from it over the years.
Yeah, they could do an effective reprint of this by just making a card that's one white, one other enchantments you control have hexproof, enchanted creatures you control have hexproof. If they really wanted to get this one, down in price from $80, it's only ever been printed in Shadowmoor, which further backs up your point that they don't want to reprint cards that have Shroud on them. But we've also seen Enchantress decks get a lot of support over the last 6 months. I mean, the most recent Commander precons that came out at time of filming this, one of them is an Enchanter deck, Auras and Enchantments Bant deck right out of the box. And so we know the strength of those. We know people are going to go pick up 5 to 10 cards, and this is the kind of card that would go directly into that, contributing to the price. I mean, $80, that is the most expensive, and it's all due to scarcity, just like Great Hinge is due to scarcity. Printed first recently, but only ever once there in Eldraine. So we've only got Eldraine and any of the collector variants to, lean on for Great Hinge, meaning extended. I don't even think we got alternate of Great Hinge. $39, $40 at time of filming this, but I mean, it's a mana rock that gets cheaper and draws you cards and puts +1/+1 counters on your creatures. It's just got a little bit of everything.
Yeah, and don't be turned off by that huge 9 cost, because most likely you're playing this alongside big beefy creatures, and most of the time when I see someone play a Great Henge, they're playing it for like 2 or 3, and then immediately tapping it to not only float 2 green but add 2 or gain 2 life. So the card is just very busted. The first interaction I ever remember was people talking about, oh, this with Rotting Regisaur in Standard is going to be a thing, but I mean, its power in EDH is just immense.
Yeah, it's how you go. It's how you go long. This is how you survive a long game in an aggressive creature-based deck that you're wanting to draw cards, and Great Henge will get you there. 5 power creatures are very common, and that makes this 4. And I would definitely pay 4 mana to cast this effect and get it onto the battlefield. We need a reprint of it. It's already time.
The card it does everything. Let's talk about Vidalcan Orrery. 4 cost for you may cast non-land cards as though they had flash. Do we need to read anything more about this?
No, I mean, there is nothing else to read. We could read the flavor text. The model incorporated the 5th Sun effortlessly as if it had always known. I mean, this card is the bomb. There are so many ways to make artifacts cheaper that 4 doesn't even matter to me. There are so many artifact-based strategies and synergies in this game that it's just so strong. It's overly powerful. This goes infinite mana with Voltaic Key and Rings of Brighthearth. That's scratching the surface of the ridiculousness that you can get into with Vidalcan Orrery. It's $35. Non-land. Everything
under the sun other than land.
It's ridiculous. I mean, Conspiracy and Fifth Dawn is the only time we've ever seen reprints of this. $35 for the Conspiracy version. The Fifth Dawn was a little bit more expensive because they had a different frame at that time, and it was an artifact-based set with an artifact-based frame. The whole deal. And so this is one of those, like a $35 card that I would expect to pop up in a pre-constructed deck if they ever made like a very flashy commander, blue-green kind of flash commander. I would see this one driving the value of that commander precon and getting people to purchase it. We know, Jake,
I mean, it's just massive reprint equity, right? And I don't even think they would ever stick it in a commander precon. I think they just know how powerful it is, and they just know that they can push an entire set with it.
Same true for probably every card on this list.
For sure. I mean, Anointed Procession, this card came out in Amonkhet, and it's just another one of these redundant effects that is doubling tokens. Dude, I mean, it's just...
If it plays alongside Doubling Season, it's going to be expensive, especially if it's a rare, even though it was out of a set. And this, Jake, I mean, this set was opened more than any set that year, hands down, and more than a lot of sets are opened, period.
Yeah, just because of the invocation cards. And so this set would have probably been opened like less than Kaladesh block, a little bit less than Battle for Zendikar, just because the invocations were so dramatically different. We've seen so many variants these days, right? Now you can like throw a rock and hit a variant. You could freaking wake up and trip over a variant on your way to the bathroom in the morning. back when we saw invocations for the first time, it was such a radical change that people hated them. Like, they hated invocations. So even though this set was mass opened, it was less open than the previous Masterpiece sets.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But even then, you know, Anointed Procession, oh man, you would have been like, it would have been a great time to pick these up when it came out. And it seemed like an expensive card at $7 or $8 when it was in standard. But then, you know, EDH, you just read it. There's so much to say about enchantments in this game and the power level of enchantments over time. Like, enchantments in a way are the most powerful permanent type in this game, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And token creators, that's also a very powerful strategy. And doubling anything is always going to be hugely valuable.
Of course.
$28
Math.
for Anointed Procession right now. We've got Training Grounds up next, Jake. This is one that we thought maybe Strixhaven was going to show us a reprint, maybe even Modern Horizons 2, but this has only ever been printed on Rise of the Eldrazi in the list, and it's a $40 one blue enchantment.
God, our buddy totally sniffed this card out way before us, didn't he? I remember Biff playing Training Grounds, and dude, this card is just so, it is just so good. When you see that 2 less to activate, activated abilities of creatures you control cost up to 2 less to activate. That saves you mana.
For
once
1 mana.
this permanent, for 1 mana, once this 1 mana enchantment, again, just talking about enchantments and how powerful they are, we have another one that we're highlighting. It just nets you so much value because it is saving you mana, dude. Like that's it. That's why the card is so valuable, is because you can do more on your turn when you have this out on the battlefield.
Yeah, I remember the first time Biff played this in his Tassiger deck, and I remember us both going, okay, fine, yep, all right, Training Grounds resolves, and him trying to be like, no, y'all, this is a sleeper hit. This is a great freaking card. And we were like, okay.
He played this in Cedrus as well with that Unearth ability. So now that Cedrus Unearth ability becomes 1 black, if I recall correctly.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's just absolute degenerate value. And you could see why it's a $40 card. And it's so funny. If you had gone back to Rise of Eldrazi, you could have bought these for like $1, less than $1 when that set was just being cracked. I mean, but we had no real EDH at that point. Yeah. So the card just seems so niche as far as standard and even modern and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it really gained its legs in EDH and Commander.
I like it a lot. It's really good. As is Crucible of Worlds. It's crazy to me that this one's on the list because it's had so many reprints, but we did want to include it because a lot of graveyards matter, lands matter. You know, the design of these pre-con decks recently has been sort of branching out and really introducing players to, you know, newer players, I guess, to more advanced concepts, and having resources besides just the card in your hand. That's a huge deal. With that Crucible of Worlds at $40, the last time we saw it was in M19, so it's been a few years at this point, and I think that it would be great for this one to come back, especially with Zendikar having just come out, or a revisit of Zendikar having just happened. You know, you've got a lot of lands that are other things. That's a cool strategy.
Yeah, so any wasteland, any strip mine, dust bowl type effect, you can get that back, play that again. So make sure to always be taking out your opponent's Gaia's Cradles, Cabal Coffers, any of those like utility lands, anything that's helping them out, like a transformed search for Azcanta, anything like that. But then also, every fetch land that you use, you can replay to continually thin out your deck, to go grab your dual lands, go grab your shock lands, go grab your triomes. It's just, again, an effect. Enchantments and artifacts, permanents that sit on the battlefield. You make a one-time mana investment, and then later on, they end up benefiting you greatly down the road.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Whoa, Jake, what is this? A Secret Lair card? What's a Secret Lair card doing in our video? Rick Steadfast
It's just so
Leader.
good. It's just so good.
I feel like this one for me just represents all of the Secret Lair, you know, mechanically unique commander cards that came out of Secret Lair Walking Dead. I just think it's getting time to reprint them. Rick is up to $36. Obviously, it's, you know, become sort of a legacy meme as well. But this is, I mean, it's been a year almost since these came out. No, it hasn't been a year.
it looks like he's saying, come on, guys, give me a reprint.
Where's my reprint? Let's just get past this Secret Lair Walking Dead thing. Let's just get past it. Just reprint them.
Just reprint Rick.
That's what we want reprinted right now. I need you to go down in the comments and let us know what you want reprinted.
Yes, but if it came out in the last 2 sets, come on, put on your patience pants. At least wait like 3 months or something.